nobody wants to pay estate taxes. I've never once had a client say, well, I'm okay with paying estate taxes. And with the exemption amount being so much higher now, there aren't as many clients that are paying estate tax, but we still have quite a few that do. We need our clients to tell us as much information as they can so that we can understand what their need is and understand how to get them to the point that they need to be at. They're not coming to your office just to say hello and see what's going on. They're coming to the office because they have an issue. They have an issue that needs to be addressed. And if they're not comfortable with you, they're not going to share the information that you need them to share.
What keeps you and your firm energized about the work that you do?
I really enjoy the client relationships. Sometimes they'll come to you because they're just so stressed and they're so concerned about a plan and they don't, or what's going to happen. And being able to give them a peace of mind is, I think, what keeps me going.
Welcome to another episode of the Collier County Bar Association's podcast, partner with Beyond the Briefcase. Today, we're going to talk with Jennifer Nackley, who's with Wilson & Johnson Law Firm. Today's conversation is not just about estate planning done right. It's not just documents, it's about relationships, trust, and long-term thinking. So Jennifer has been with the firm for several years now, and we're going to learn more about her practice as also the firm's practice overall. So welcome, Jennifer.
Well, welcome, Matt. Thank you for having me. We're really excited to be a part of your podcast.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. Well, before we dive in, when someone walks into Wilson & Johnson for the first time, what do you hope that they feel right away?
Ease. We want them to feel at ease. And the reason I say that is because a client, we need our clients to tell us as much information as they can so that we can understand what their need is and understand how to get them to the point that they need to be at. And what I mean by that is they're not coming to your office just to say hello and see what's going on. They're coming to the office because they have an issue. They have an issue that needs to be addressed. And if they're not comfortable with you, they're not going to share the information that you need them to share. And so I think the most important thing is they come in, they feel a level of comfort with you, they feel confident with you. And yeah, that's what I would want them to feel when they first walk in, level of confidence and to be at ease.
Yeah, well, that's good. I know the firm has been in town for quite a long time, has really deep roots here. And I mean, how would you describe Wilson & Johnson's philosophy when it comes to client services and planning?
Sure. So we take a couple of things. We take a very holistic approach to client service. And what I mean by that is we don't want to just operate in a bubble or in a vacuum. We want to know who their accountants are. We want to know who their financial advisors are. And we want to be able to work together as a team so that we can understand what makes them tick, what their issues are, and how to best address their issues with everyone involved. So I think that's the first thing. The second is we all at the office, there are 10 attorneys, we all work very collaboratively. And if we've got an issue, something we may not have seen, we'll talk to one of the other attorneys and see who can, if anyone's seen that issue before, and for different ideas. I had a client come in one time, a younger gentleman, significant assets, a lot of real property, not very liquid. And we had to address concerns with payment of estate tax. And how are we going to address payment of estate tax? How could we potentially reduce his overall estate tax liability? So I just sat down at lunch with all the attorneys and I gave them his financial information and we just kicked around different ideas. And then when I met with the client, I presented all these different ideas and approaches that we could take. He was just thrilled with us.
It's nice when you can have a cohort of individuals that have different expertise and have dealt with those situations before where you can come up with creative solutions. But what the clients like most is to have options, right? They didn't come to you for the only solution or the best solution. We have to, as attorneys, give them the options that they have, even if that means doing nothing, so they know what the results are, and sort of lead them into what we think is the best, but ultimately let them make the decision.
Correct. Correct. I agree in that they may come, clients often will come and say, well, my neighbor has this, and I want what my neighbor has. And I'll explain to them, everyone's situation is different. Everyone's estate plan is tailored to just them. And we'll go through, if they want to talk about they want to talk about their neighbors have, we'll talk about that, but then we'll go through what issues they have and what their overall goal and objective is, and then we can give them different ideas about what might work best for them, and then let them choose.
We tell them what our hourly rates are or whatever the fee's going to be, but if they've worked on it first or they have it all laid out for us, it's usually going to cost them more,
Right.
right? So that's not to dissuade people to come in and have ideas that they got from their neighbors or from their family members or even from past experience, but as you know, there's no one size fits all.
Right.
So it's good to have a foundation to build off of. Well, what distinguishes your approach from what people might expect when walking into a typical law firm? Because you've worked at other law firms, you worked at larger firm before.
Right. And I think that this goes back to me saying that we work very collaboratively together. I've been at other firms, perhaps where some attorneys may have worked more like a silo and keep information to themselves. We're very collaborative. We share ideas. I think by working the way that we do, we're able to put together a plan for a client that can be very creative. That's, again, I work with attorneys that you may know. I work with Will Clements, Kyle Bacchus, Blake Kirkpatrick. Everyone comes from different experiences, different backgrounds. They may have done a plan for a client that I wouldn't have thought would be or I wouldn't have thought about for this client.
Hmm.
But they'll suggest, why don't you try this, or why don't you maybe think about this, or suggest this or that to the client. And that I think is really different. I've never really experienced that at other firms that I've been at. So I really do think that that's one of the things that distinguishes our firm. We're very collegial, very collaborative, and that's different from other places I've been, and I would imagine other firms in town.
Well, I know we're known to have big egos,
Mhm.
right? So if we can check our ego at the collaboration desk and really be open-minded, then it really does a service to the client.
Right. Right. I mean, I truly believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and everyone at the firm follows along that same philosophy that if we're helping each other,
Hmm.
me helping one of the other attorneys helps us all.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's I think a great place to be when we're all helping each other in that regard.
What do clients often misunderstand when they first come in?
I think that there's a couple of things that they misunderstand. They Again, because they'll say, well, my neighbor did X, Y, and Z, or I heard, or I saw on TV. And I don't think that they necessarily understand what goes into a plan and the different techniques that you can have for both transitioning wealth on a multi-generational level, for reducing estate taxes, or creating a legacy. So I don't think that they always understand what it is that what we can do, and the different options that there are that they would have never given thought to.
Hmm.
And I know one of your questions a little bit later on, but I'm gonna touch on it now, is what trends have we seen? And I'll tell you, one of the things I've seen most recently is we have a higher net worth client that comes in, um, and nobody wants to pay estate taxes. I've never once had a client say, "Well, I'm okay with paying estate taxes," and with the exemption amount being so much higher now, there aren't as many clients that are paying estate tax, but we still have quite a few that do. And a lot are really liking the idea of creating a charitable foundation. And they like that idea of working with their families, working with younger generations,
Yeah.
and being very philanthropic and teaching younger generations about being philanthropic and giving back to the community. And when I've talked about that with clients, it's like a giant light bulb. And the idea of giving back, teaching their children, teaching their grandchildren, all coming together, coming up with a plan
Hmm.
is just something that really is is something they're enjoying and are really gravitating toward.
Well, a lot of that shows up most clearly in estate planning for these people that have the taxable estate, but it's either to the government or to a charitable foundation. So I think that's a really good,
Hmm.
it sounds like we're at the right time to do those kinds of things because we don't know what the exemption is going to be,
Right.
right? There's always an opinion on when it sunsets here, is it going to keep going up? And, the laws change with each administration. So it's good to be able to take advantage of the current tax laws and put things in place that are sustainable even in the midst of that change.
Right. Right.
Very good. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that families face today when it comes to estate planning. What would you say are the two that come up most frequently in your practice?
So I would say one of the things that's been coming up a lot is we have a lot more blended families, and people are concerned about how do they make sure assets will either equally be divided among the children from a blended family, or make sure that one set of children are not cut out on the death of the first spouse.
Right.
So that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges we're seeing
That's huge.
lately. And it is huge. When I first started practicing, it really wasn't as big of an issue, or I didn't see as many clients that were coming to us that were from blended families.
Hmm.
And I think that's the biggest issue, and how to make sure that the clients are put at ease at knowing that on the death of the first spouse, that we've got a plan in place that will make sure their children are going to inherit something.
I imagine you have a lot of people coming back in the last 2 years and probably a little bit post COVID where their net value, their net worth doubled or even tripled. And now they have a problem that they didn't foresee before that.
Right.
And that's where that comes into play, where it's like, now we're definitely gonna die with some money, maybe a lot. So let's figure out how we can control that after we're gone.
Right.
And I've had clients come to me after thinking they were going to live for another 10, 20 years. They come back with a terminal illness and they took a very complex plan and they simplified it when they found out they were on their deathbed. How do you deal with sort of swaying those expectations? And are you meeting with the husband and wife together and talking to them about what their wishes? Do you have any prerequisites before they come in to make sure they're not going to be arguing at your table?
That's a great question, and I always want to meet with them together. And when clients first come to me, I always tell them that I represent you as a unit. I don't represent you individually. If you wanted individual counsel, then you'll need to retain separate counsel. So I do represent them as a unit. I have had them at my table, pounding the table, screaming, crying that this isn't what one of them wants, or this isn't what they thought was going to happen. And part of our role is to counsel. And we're counselors, and our role is to counsel them and to try to help them understand, try to take some of the emotion out, understand what the issue is, and how to best get to a place where everyone is comfortable. But I've had those situations where clients are not necessarily on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Just got to get them to refocus and understand that we can get to where we need to be and make everyone comfortable.
Yeah, and each couple is different. Like you say, I've experienced some heated discussions at the table, and usually we'll just call a timeout and say, it sounds like you have some more to talk about amongst yourselves, and we should reschedule unless you're comfortable continuing.
Hmm.
And, sometimes they'll go against what you feel is best and say, no, we'll continue, we'll stay. Don't worry, we'll talk about it later. And then that just prolongs the process
Right.
because then you have to have them come back to substantiate what they believed was what they both wanted. You see a lot of postnuptial agreements put in place where somebody who got married without a prenuptial agreement and now they've come to you and they don't necessarily think they need one, or nor do they want one, but that might be one of the solutions to their comprehensive plan.
Right. Right, it is. Lots of times I'll present that as a potential option. And initially, when people hear post-nuptial agreement, they get really bristly and it's not something they want to talk about. But when I explain that it's a contract, and that's all it is a contract. And by having this contract in place, on the death of the first spouse, we're guaranteeing a plan, and we're guaranteeing that what their overall objective is will be met. And I think that that is a great way to address some of the, especially now we've got to, like you said, the values of estates are just exploding in the last few years. That's a great way to address issues where we've got a blended family, or we have a situation. I mean, I have a situation right now where it's not a blended family. It's a couple that have children together, but they have a different view on whether one child should get more, one child should get their assets at a certain age, or one should remain in trust for lifetime.
You
And
mean they're not aligned 100% on their co-parenting beliefs and their values?
yes, that's what I'm saying. And those are really the trickiest. Those are really the trickiest. But again, I think you just need to. Sometimes I'll just draw a flow chart, and I'll draw it out for them. And I think once they see what it is they're talking about, or what they're asking for their plan to be, and they go through it, they realize, gee, that's not what they want, or they didn't understand what they thought their plan said. And sometimes it's just as simple as drawing out a little flow chart, and then we can get everyone on the right page.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about estate planning, and I know the firm has other practice areas intertwined. Um, what else should people know about the firm?
So, a couple of different things. So, we do some real estate work. And when I say we do some real estate work, we really only do it within our own client base. So, if we had a client that wanted to acquire a piece of property, or wanted to lots of times we'll do qualified personal residence trusts for clients. So we can draft the deeds, get the property over to the Cooper, assist them with transferring property to LLCs or creating LLCs. But that type of work we really only do when it intertwines with the estate plan. So it isn't as if, Mr. or Mrs. Smith came off the street and wanted to sell their business to Home Depot. We wouldn't be able to help them with that.
Mhm.
Or we had someone that wanted to sell commercial property, we wouldn't be able to help them with that. But we do have the capacity to assist with real estate and business, I'll call business planning, with when it's part of their overall estate plan.
Do you offer succession planning as well?
We do. hmm We do.
Very good. Now, one thing I always think about when I think Wilson and Johnson is the fiduciary accountants that you have on staff. So, how many do you have on staff currently?
We currently have three fiduciary accountants, and that, I tell you, will probably distinguish us from other practices in town, where we have that capacity to prepare the 1041s, we can prepare 706s, we can prepare 709s, but also prepare the accountings. Sometimes we'll have clients or beneficiaries who will waive an accounting. Sometimes we've got highly contested um, beneficiaries, and we've got to do a full formal accounting, and we have that capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I often will refer a matter there when I know that's best kept in-house for these larger estates. My practice is focused on real estates. We do some foundational estate planning and probate, but I like to say I know what I don't know, and I like to refer out the ones that are best served with that comprehensive approach where there's a focus on that.
Right.
What other services does the firm provide? I know that, well, and here, in so trust administration.
Right.
Right, let's just get that out there. So there's probate administration and trust administration. Your firm with these fiduciary accountants has a lot more capacity to do more intense trust administration compared to other firms.
That's correct. I mean, I would say, from a probate standpoint, we do, it's minimal. And the reason why I say our probate administrations are minimal is because part of what we do when we help our clients with an estate plan, we help them get their assets titled into their trust. And the overall goal is to avoid or minimize of probate. So from the onset, it's teaching our clients about getting our assets titled into our trust, assigning assets into the trust, and to avoid probate.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily see, we may see something come through where an asset, a bank account, or some small asset for whatever reason didn't get titled into their trust. So we may have a summary administration. Sometimes we have issues where we think we're going to have a contested matter, so we'll do a full formal administration
Mm.
just to flush out issues. But for the most part, our practice, a large part of our practice is trust administration, because that's where we've assisted the clients with getting their assets transferred in there. And a lot of our clients will have lifetime trusts in place. So we continue to guide our clients and give them advice on the administration of that trust moving forward.
So
That's
what
a
if,
big part of our practice.
so what if an attorney or what if a client comes to you that wants to make changes and they have a complex plan in place, but it was prepared by another firm with different forms and it looks completely different? How do you approach that new engagement?
Well, no, that's a great question. And really, I would say, there's a case that came out a few years ago where an attorney was doing a favor for the neighbor. The neighbor said, "Can you just change who the trustee is?" And the estate planning attorney, trying to do a favor, just drafted the document, made the change of who the trustee was, and client dies. Lo and behold, there's a significant issue that is going to result in estate tax that should not have happened.
Meaning they came to change the trustee, the lawyer did the favor, but the lawyer should have dug deeper at the time to
Right.
make sure it didn't make sense to make other changes.
Correct. And
Interesting.
the attorney ended up getting sued for malpractice and was on the hook for millions of dollars of estate tax that was not, that had the plan been done right the first time, the tax wouldn't have been due. And malpractice carriers, they say who touched it last, and whoever touched it last is the one where the liability lands. So in situations like that, we'll tell clients, we're going to do a restatement of your trust, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to pay for that," or "I only want to change who the trustee is." And I say, I can certainly understand and appreciate that. However, our malpractice carrier requires that we restate the trust. And then this way we have an opportunity to go through it, make sure we look at all the dispositive provisions, make sure everything's done correctly and there are no issues. Yeah, so anyone that comes to us and says, "I only want to pay for just this, just this little paragraph," can't you just push a button and make that little paragraph come out?
Yeah. It's always it's always real simple.
Right, right.
Well,
It's
I'm glad you shared that story because people that, especially with the rise of AI,
mm-hmm.
they may just upload their trusts and say they want to change one thing and they'll come to you with the solution in their hand. But what you're saying is you have to follow a certain protocol with everybody, and that's restate something that came from another state or was prepared by another attorney. So I think that's another reason it's helpful to have multiple attorneys in the firm where there's bound to be one or two of those attorneys here 30, 40 years from now.
Right. The other thing that we do, everything that goes out the door has to have a second set of eyes. So I may prepare just a simple trust or simple restatement, thinking, there's nothing to this, but
Mhm.
that's not our policy. Our policy is every document has to have a second set of eyes, because you may think that you've got it all, but sometimes there just might be something that you missed, and it doesn't hurt to have a second set of eyes. It's really
Yeah.
helpful to have a second set of eyes. The other thing I think that we do different, when clients come to us, I always ask that they bring all of their financial statements with them. And I know sometimes they get a little bristly with that and don't want to provide me with their financial statements. And I tell them, everything comes, every reason we do, everything we do is because there's a reason, that we've seen something happen along the way. And I had a client come in. She wanted to make a change to her document, and I asked for copies of her statements. And she was a little, not, yeah, I think when you ask for statements or you ask for asset informations, you're going to charge them more.
Right.
And I explained to them, no, that's not necessarily how it works. What drives the cost is the complexity of the document, not the value of your assets. So let's just say her trust was the Mary Jane Smith Trust of 1990. I got the statements from the financial advisor and it said the Mary Jane Trust from 1970.
Okay.
And I said, your assets are titled in a different trust. And we went back and forth, and she insisted that they weren't. We went to the financial advisor, and they produced a copy of the trust from 1970, and that's where those assets were titled, and we had very different beneficiaries.
Oh, wow.
And before the client came to me, she went to 4 or 5, like she'd been in town for a long time, and she'd gone to 4 or 5 other attorneys who made changes to her documents, but nobody asked her to see her financial statements. And had someone asked to see her financial statements, they would have caught it before I
Because
did.
there was a more recent date.
Yeah, she created a second trust.
Oh,
She created a second
and that's the
trust.
one she thought was funded the assets.
Right, she thought that the second new trust was where all the assets were titled.
Ooh,
All the assets were in the old trust.
interesting.
They had very, very different beneficiaries.
I can imagine after what, 50 years? So had those attorneys looked, that's just a simple question.
Mhm.
That's a great story to tell people that are a little hesitant to provide those information. I mean, we only have about a third of our clients, our estate planning clients, ask if they should bring anything. So it's good to have that protocol where you just tell them, please bring everything.
Right,
That way everybody knows up front that you're gonna look at that stuff.
right.
Behind all of that team, there's a standard of practice, and I think the firm, from my vantage point, being here just over 10 years, has a very high standard of practice. And um, how would you say Wilson and Johnson maintains consistency and excellence sort of across the firm?
That's a great question. And I think one of the things that we all do is we all continue to go to different continuing legal education courses. And we all come back and share that information with each other. And I think that you never stop learning. You always have to continue to go to classes, go to seminars, learn different techniques that are out there, learn about
Mhm.
new law that's coming out that can impact our plan. And I think that's how we do it. We continue to stay current with what's out there, and we continue to share that information with each other. And I think another thing that's a little bit different from that is responsiveness to clients. Clients, have to be very responsive to clients. They're not calling you to say hello or what's going on. They're calling you because they have an issue. And I think one of the most important things is being responsive. And if a client calls me today and I can't call the client back, I'll have my assistant or someone else at the office call the client and say, Jennifer can't get to you today. We've got your call. She'll call you back tomorrow. This way, they're not out there wondering what happened. Where is she? Why isn't she returning my call? I have this issue. So I think for younger younger attorneys, that's what I would tell them is learn to be very responsive to your clients because that's the one thing I think they're not forgiving on. Where if they've called you, they, again, they're calling because there's a reason, and they're they trust you, and if you're not calling them back, they're not going to stay with you.
Don't be afraid to send a response because that's better than no response.
Correct.
Even if the response is, I'm busy,
Correct.
in a nicer way, of course. I think that's
Correct.
great advice. I learned from reading all the bar complaints. I read every month's journal that comes out from the Florida Bar News, and there's always one in there for communication issues. Failed to update the client, failed to respond to phone calls, even rising to the level of disbarment for continued violations of lack of communication.
And the other thing too, I tell them is if you're going to send communication out on their behalf, copy them on that communication. This way they're aware of what's going on, because they don't want to, you don't want your client wondering what it is you're doing, and that you don't want them to know what you're doing when they receive the bill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just always keeping your client aware of what's going on. So if let's say we had a contested matter, and I sent you an email. After I sent you the email, the first thing I'm going to do is forward that email to the client and say, just so that you know, this is the communication that I had with Matt. One of the things I'll tell you I never do is copy a client on the email to the opposing
I'm
counsel.
so glad you said that. You know, in the real estate world, we see this more than anything because there's often an attorney on both sides, and it's a short-lived transaction. And it's what is uncontested could easily become contested, and then you have then yeah, that's just a recipe for disaster. Because when I get an email and the client's copied on it, I actually had an attorney call me the other day with his client on a conference with him. So what I found out after is that it was the buyer's father, but same last name. So I'm just thinking and the attorney said, so I said, well, let me get my client on the phone. Let's just bring it all together now. It was almost like an impromptu mediation where that we were trying to massage the issue out. And but in professionality, civility, you have to think about that when you're sending emails or any kind of correspondence, especially phone calls where you ask permission rather than forgiveness.
Right.
But forwarding emails is a good practice. And I think that's really good advice for younger attorneys where they might hide behind their desk or their phone and they're not sure how to respond. So they need time to think about it. And the best thing to do is just confirm receipt, let them know you've received their message and you'll get back to them soon. And forwarding is always best. What about blind copying?
Same thing. I am not a fan of blind copying. I would prefer, uh, only because, again, I have a reason behind everything. Had a situation one time, where an attorney copied her client on an email. Apparently, the client didn't realize that she was copied, or didn't realize that she hit
Was blind copy?
and hit response and said something very inappropriate that then everybody saw. And so I am not a fan of blind copying, CCing. I am a fan of the forward button.
Yeah. Well, that's it's good to hear that more than once. I think we've all blind copied someone and you always roll the dice when you do that. You assume your client is going to know better when they don't see their name in the to or the copy field. None of these things that we're talking about happen in isolation, and that's where I want to transition this conversation about the firm's involvement with the Collier County Bar Association. Um, how does Wilson and Johnson engage with the Collier County Bar Association?
So, in a lot of different levels. So we're obviously we're a sponsor of the Collier County Bar Association. We Several of our attorneys, actually, I think most of our attorneys are member of the Trust and Estate section. Kyle Bacchus is the current chair of the Trust and Estate
Mhm.
section. I'd like to go to as many of the general session lunches. I'd like to meet other attorneys in the bar, not just Trust and Estates attorneys. Several of our female attorneys are members of the Collier County Women's Bar Association. Um, and though, that's not, I don't really think that's a part of the bar itself. I think it might be something else separate. But a lot of our female attorneys are engaged in that. So we do like to go to the different events of the bar. We do, like to participate in different things that the bar is offering.
Well, you mentioned meeting non-estate planning attorneys, and I mean, just talk on that for a minute. What you've seen over your how many years, 30 plus years in practice, how getting to know the attorneys that practice in other areas has really benefited your practice.
Sure. So that's a great question. When I first came to town, I worked with a couple of attorneys who were very well established in the firm or in the community, and I wasn't necessarily going to go to the same trust officers that they were with and get referrals from them. I had to think about what could I do to distinguish myself, and what could I do to build a referral source. And I just started going to general
Mhm.
bar lunches, meeting attorneys from different practices. And I'll tell you, and even now, one of my biggest sources of referral work is from other attorneys in town. There may be, I know we talked earlier about Ed Sheffy. Ed may have a file that's a trust and estate issue, where he can't handle it, so he's going to call the trust and estate attorney that he knows. Or if there's conflict work that maybe their firm can't handle, they're going to refer it to attorneys that they know and respect.
Yeah.
So I've found that over the years, meeting other attorneys in different practice areas, two was beneficial for two things. First, it was a great source of referral work for me, but also it was a great resource for me because an issue may come up that I had no idea how to address it. I had no idea who to send it to, but I knew I could call you. And I could
Mhm.
call you and say, Matt, I have this issue. What do you think? And you may say to me, I can't fix this, but I know who can. And I think that in being able to have that level of or depth of resources available to you that you can offer to your clients is a great service.
It's huge. I say 95% of my referral list is s- directly related to my involvement at the Collier County Bar events,
Mhm.
getting out there. And then the other 5% is conferences in other areas of the state where I learn of more specialized practitioners that don't necessarily live here.
Right,
Even though the legal community here is really strong, you always have somebody in another city that may be more of an expert in one area. So it's good to build that referral network.
right.
I tell my clients that if I trust these people. If they trust me, they don't have to go and do a Google search in the area, or maybe they own property in a different state
Mhm.
or a different part of the state. So it's good to have those relationships, but you won't know unless you ask, unless you get out there.
Right. I had a client one time. She was selling a business. She and her husband had been divorced for 7 years, but they continued to hold the business together. And there was and I don't remember the exact issue, but there was a very specific tax issue that had come up. And I said, I can't answer that question, but let me call one of my former partners at a different law firm. And I called her and she said, I don't know the answer to that, but let me call one of her former partners at a different law firm. And we ended up referring my client to an attorney in Boston who knew exactly what the issue was and knew exactly how to fix it. And we got the client a fabulous result. And had I not known attorneys in other practice areas or kept good relations with clients and or with prior partners, I would have never been able to get that result for the client.
Yeah, I mean, so the relationships not just impacting your practice, but the outcomes of your clients,
Correct. Mhm.
which is directly related, of course. But um, I want to talk before we end. We'll go into another area, but I've asked everybody that I've interviewed so far on how they're incorporating AI and how AI may be changing or making their practice more challenging.
Sure.
So, the first question is, what ways are you using AI to maybe enhance the service that you're providing since our clients are relying on it?
So, I mean, I've seen AI probably pop up more in litigation matters where people are trying to maybe try to find a case or try to find a different way to address an issue that they have. We do use AI with regard to document production in that regard. So it's not as if we're going on and doing a Google search and how to plan for a client,
Hmm.
but internally we do have document production. We do have systems in place for calculating timelines. So in a probate or in a trust administration, we're governed by very strict timelines for when things have to be filed, when things have to be served. And we're using that to help us with calculating and calendaring all of our dates. There's some, we're also using it for integrating asset information with the plan and then being able to flow chart out the plan with the assets.
Interesting. Yeah, it's amazing what it can do now, but you have to really use it to enhance the service and your
Not
expertise,
substitute it,
not
correct?
substitute.
Mhm,
Yeah, thank you. I was looking
mhm.
for that word. So, well, so we're gonna wrap up here in a couple minutes. I just wanted to ask some questions that we kind of always finish this. One is, what keeps you and your firm energized about the work that you do?
I think for myself, I really enjoy the client relationships, and I like when I can prepare an overall plan for a client, and it gets them to where they want to be, and they feel so, sometimes they'll come to you because they're just so stressed and they're so concerned about a plan and they don't or what's going to happen, and being able to give them a peace of mind is, I think, what keeps me going, knowing that clients, again, they're not coming to you just to say hello, they're coming to you because they've got an issue. And knowing that I can give them a peace of mind, I think is what keeps me going.
Well, what guidance does your firm emphasize when developing strong attorneys?
Um, again, I think there's a lot of different things, but I think probably one of the most important is being respectful to others in the community, and also within our firm. I mean, we can't practice and do what we do without our staff, without all of our support staff. Being very respectful to everyone, um, being respectful to to opposing counsel, and just acting in a very professional, ethical way. When I grew up, my dad always told me my word is my bond. And if
Hmm.
I didn't have that, I had nothing. And I think that I always followed that philosophy, and I try to impart that on the attorneys that we work with. I try to tell them to, um, if you none of us know the answer to everything, and we certainly don't expect you to know the answer to everything, but what we want is, if you have a question, then come to us, and we're here to help guide you and train you and mentor you. And I think by having a very open door policy, we're able to build strong attorneys.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Being approachable, but also um, be information seeking. So
Right.
the attorneys have to be humble, set their ego aside, that they're not going to have the answers to all the questions, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And they have the benefit of coming to someone in the firm that has an answer, or at least knows where to find the answer.
Right.
What kind of reputation do you want Wilson and Johnson to continue to build in the community?
Um, that we level of trust, that the clients have that level of trust with us, that we have true depth in the experience that we have. And what I mean by that is, we are we're an estate planning boutique firm. For the most part, this is all that we do. And so
Hmm.
we're experts in this area. Several of our attorneys are board certified, several of our attorneys have LLMs in estate planning, and I just want to be known as a premier estate planning firm in town.
Well, I think you all are doing a great job because having been here just 10, 11 years, it's definitely on the top three on my list
Well, thank you.
when I have someone to refer.
Thank you.
And that's what I love about this profession. We don't have to have all the answers. There's enough work to go around.
Mhm.
There's enough clients. But something you said really hit home, where just maintain professionalism, because oftentimes we'll work with another attorney to some extent, or even an advisor, and they maybe don't carry that same level of ethics or professionalism, and um, you get to sort of be the leader in that regards, and it's okay um, to take the high road, and it's often better than just acquiescing to their style, their level, or their ethics.
Right.
It's going to pay dividends in the long run. Well, thank you for coming today and for representing the firm, Wilson and Johnson, and for sponsoring the Cowley County Bar Association. They couldn't do what they do without sponsors like you.
Well, thank you, May. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk about the firm and myself a bit.
Well, behind every plan and every client and every decision, there's a human story. We got to hear a little bit more about Jennifer's and Wilson and Johnson's. And this is the Beyond the Briefcase, hosted by Collier County Bar. Thanks again for watching.